So I wrote a script, Schlock, which is really, Schlock is a satire. It's a very low budget satire or parody of very low budget monster gorilla movies. And it's really based on Trog. I mean, and many others. Because that was so stupid. And so I had made in Europe almost $40,000. That was my life savings. And I put all my money, I put $30,000. And then we raised, Jim O'Rourke and I raised the other $30,000 from people, $1,000, $3,000. The biggest investment besides mine was my great uncle, my grandfather's brother, who gave us $10,000. And then, years later, after Animal House, he called me up. He said, "John, you're rich now. Give me my $10,000 back." So, okay. But anyway, and we made Schlock. We shot it in 11 days. And I met, my original idea, Schlock's a terrible movie, but there's some funny things in it, and it's charming, but it's very silly. But there is, what is remarkable in it is the makeup on Schlock. Rick Baker, my idea in the script was just to have a bad gorilla suit. I mean, I thought I'd just be a bad gorilla suit and everyone treat it like it was real, you know. So I went to John Chambers, who I knew, and who did Planet of the Apes and many, many movies. And I said to John, "How much would it cost if, for you to make me like a gorilla suit?" He said, "Well, it's expensive because it's a lot of work." And I said, "Well, a bad gorilla, how much?" He said, $150,000, $200,000. And I said, who else can I ask? And I was sent to a place in Burbank called Don Post. Don Post is a company that made these heavy rubber pullover masks that were sold in stores for Halloween and stuff. They were like heavy. You've seen them, Frankenstein, these heavy masks. And I went to Don Post, and he wanted like $75,000. Like, what? So as I was leaving, a man 35, was painting a mask, and he said, "Psst, kid." "Yes." He said, "There was a boy in here yesterday who tried to get a job. We had no job, but he was very talented." And he looked around here, and he gave me a business card that said, "Rick Baker, Monster Maker." And it had a phone number, which was his parents' house in in Covina. Now, I grew up in West L.A. Covina could be Kansas. I'm thinking, where the fuck is Covina? It's like an hour and a half. So I call him up and say, "Do you make monsters?" And he, "Yes." Okay, so Jim and I drove out to Covina, to his lower middle class neighborhood, to his parents' house, parents Ralph and Doris. And we go in to meet Rick, and he's this skinny kid with bad skin and long, long hair, very shy. And I said, "Can I see some of your work?" He said, "Oh, yeah." And he takes me into his bedroom, small, but it was lined with shelves. And I looked at stuff. I'll never forget it, because I turned to Jim and I said, "Kid's a genius." Because I'd been working on movies now for years. This was better than anything I'd seen. And I said, his budget, by the way, on Schlock was $4,000. And all the molds, took molds of my body and everything, and all the appliances, nothing could be bigger than his mother's oven. He cooked it all in his mom's oven, and she complained that my pies smell like foam rubber. But the makeup in Schlock was remarkable. I had to cut my hair and shave my beard, but what was it? And it became evident that Schlock could be a real character, not a prop, not just an object of a joke. He really could be the star of the movie, because he could express things. Now, of course, the problem was it took 3.5 hours to put all this stuff on. So, and to take it off took another 2 hours. So that meant 5 hours of the day I was in a makeup chair. And it also meant I had to wear it all day. I had to direct a movie. And people, it was very disturbing in real life looking at, people would talk to me like it really bothered people. And we shot it in 11 days in Agoura, which is where they made a lot of westerns out there. Now it's all homes, but then it was all wild snakes and stuff. And Agoura, we had a heat wave, and this is not an exaggeration. It was, I think, the hottest summer in California history. It was 110 degrees, 5 of the days. The lowest it ever got was 103. And I'm in this rubber suit, and I would lose about 5 or 6 pounds a day. Really. And in the morning, I'd eat pancakes. Yeah, we didn't pay anybody. Almost all the actors are amateurs. Although Andrew Marton and Laszlo Benedict and John Chambers, there are a lot of pretty famous people in the movie, but none of them are actors. They're directors and big. But do you know who's Harriet Medine plays Mindy's mother? And if you look up Harriet, she was also called Enrique Blank, but if you look up her credits, she's in all the movies of Pasolini, Rossellini, Fellini. I mean, she's in all the great Italian. She's in Mario Bava's Black Sabbath. She's in so many. She lived in Rome for many years, and I had met her in Spain in some Fernando Rey Spanish Western where I get hung, and she said, "I'm moving back to California." So when I was making Schlock, I called her up. I said, "Want to be in a movie?" She was retired, so. What was interesting is, as a director, I learned more making Schlock than any other experience, and not shooting it. Because shooting it, I knew how to make a movie. That wasn't a problem. In the cutting room, I learned, oh shit, why don't I have this shot? Why didn't I do that? The editor, George Folsey, who I later made my producer, George Folsey Jr., I learned more cutting Schlock than anything. I really learned a lot. And I think that working in the cutting room is a good experience for me, which I'd never done. And then cutting the movie, I thought, why don't I have this shot? Why don't I, because the movie's all about coverage and pieces. So I learned a lot making Schlock. I haven't seen that movie in 30 years. I might find it charming, I don't know. People always say, he made his first film at 21. Well, I made my first film at 21. I couldn't get a distributor. They were throwing me out. It was like, I was very naive. What I should have done was gotten on a plane and flown to Mifed or Venice or Cannes and gone to the Marché and sold it, but I didn't know anything. So we went to the studios. Would you like to distribute our movie? They all went, no. And Roger Corman, who I like, but Roger wanted me to, can't you add tits in it? And I'm going, no, it's not, it's kind of for children, sort of, No, I think you should, if you add tits to it. What? There was a television show in America that ran for many years called The Tonight Show. And it came on at 11 o'clock at night. And remember, there used to only be 3 networks, And Johnny Carson was the host, and he was a very loved and respected figure, a funny guy, and he did it for like 35 years, I don't know. But he had the biggest audience in the country. Literally, he'd have 20 to 50 million people a night watch. That doesn't happen anymore. And a booker, someone connected with his show, heard about my movie and asked to see it, and he saw it, and then showed it to Johnny Carson. And he loved it. He thought it was very funny. In fact, it's the only movie he gave a quote. In the ads, it said, really wild, really funny, Johnny Carson, which meant a lot. He was very strange, but he was very nice to me, very generous. And he had me on his show. And it was funny, because that time I was 23. The movie was finished for over a year and a half, but I was told I had to say I was 21. because the gimmick was I was 21-year-old filmmaker. I go, yeah, but I'm 23 now. Shut up. So anyway, I was on that show, and they showed clips. And I got a distributor like that. But also, I had a friend named Bob Weiss, and Bob Weiss was the manager of a company called Video Systems, which was a video production company that made training films, educational films, and I worked for him many times as a director, as a stuntman. We made things like trucking safety, and I would always make them insane, like the wrong way to step off a truck. We did all these wacky shit. And so I was on Johnny Carson. So meanwhile, Kentucky Fried Theater, with Jim Abrams, Jerry Zucker, and David Zucker, and a guy named Pat Proft, Steven Stucker, they all came out from Madison, Wisconsin. They had a sketch group. And their uncle owned a building on Pico, near Fox, actually. And they lived upstairs, and the bottom they made into kind of a theater. And they had Kentucky Fried Theater, and they did skits. And they were pretty successful. I mean, they would, get audiences, and it was wild and funny, and they did shows, I think, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and the rest of the week they fucked around, But I didn't know them. Bob Weiss, who I did know, played basketball with them every Saturday. So I went on Johnny Carson to promote the show, and they showed Schlock. And David Zucker saw me. And that Saturday came in to play, and he said, hey, you know what? I saw a kid, he's our age, and he made a movie. And Bob Weiss said, John Landis? And he went, yeah. He said, I know John Landis. So they said they wanted to meet me because they wanted to make a movie. So I met with Jerry, David, and Jim, and Bob. And they were very funny, very nice guys, but they said, we want to make a movie. I said, great, do you have a script? And they literally went, a what? A screenplay? No. I said, well, you need a script. They go, well, what's that? I said, it's, a form that you tell the story, you write like a play, you write down, so you have. And they said, well, what's the form? So I said, wait a minute. So I went to my car, because I had copies of An American Werewolf in London, which I'd written in 1969. I always carried it around trying to get it made. I said, here, follow this form. And they were nice guys, and we got along fine. And then I went and saw their show, and some of it was very funny, and it was very risque, but it was very funny. And then about 5 months later, they called me up, hey, we got a script. Great. They give it to me, and it's called Kentucky Fried Airplane. And I read the script, and it had some very funny jokes, but I knew the story. Crew gets poisoned, and I'm thinking, wait a minute, is this 0 Hour? Well, there's a Paramount B picture from the 50s called 0 Hour. Airplane is 0 Hour, the exact framework of 0 Hour. And I said, there's a difference between satire and plagiarism. So find out who, because you can't do that, find out who owns 0 Hour. It starred Robert Stack. So they go to Paramount. Turns out a producer named Howard Koch, old producer, who also produced, it was one of the writers of Casablanca. But anyway, he's an old guy. And they said, we would like to do this. And he said, get the fuck out of here. They came back and said, he won't let us. I said, well, then let's change it. So we worked on it for months, and we added jokes. I worked on it for a long time, but we could never get it away from the basic structure. And I thought, So Bob Weiss, now he says that I said this. I think he said this. Jerry and David and Jim say I said this. I think Bob said this. But somebody said, well, why don't we just make your show? So I said, that's a good idea. So I looked at the show, and there were about 4 things in it that would work. I said, but the rest is not cinematic. We'd have to. So we wrote then Kentucky Fried Movie. Took us about, because I was working as a writer and a stuntman and all kinds of stuff. So I remember I got a job on James Bond, Spy Who Loved Me, so I had to go to London for months. But anyway, we all worked on this script. Pat Proft, a guy who wrote a lot of it. And we came up with Kentucky Fried Movie. And it's a long story, but the best part is that, so there was a theater in Los Angeles called the New Art, still there, Santa Monica Boulevard by the freeway. And they showed old movies and new movies and cult movies, and every Friday the Rocky Horror Show, things like that. And I didn't know this, but it was owned by a Dutch guy named Kim Jorgensen. And we decided, since everyone who read the script said, "What is this?" They couldn't figure it out at all. I suggested, why don't we shoot 10 minutes of it? Just choose some and shoot 10. And then show that to people, and they'll understand what it is, and then we can put that 10 minutes in the movie. So David and Jerry and Jim put up the money. I think it was $20,000. And Bob produced it, and I directed it. We all worked on it, and we shot 10 minutes. Cleopatra Schwartz, I forgot, it was like 10 minutes. And we cut it together, and they were virgins to the whole process. And they would say, "Why are you doing that?" And I would, go away. Like I had a shot of a gun firing, a close-up to put in the trailer, Cleopatra Schwartz. They said, "Who's shooting the gun?" I said, "It doesn't matter. What are they shooting at?" "It's a shot of a gun to put into a trailer. It doesn't make sense." It was, anyway, so I finished it, and I was very happy with it. I said, "This is very funny." And the boys looked at it and go, "This is not funny." "It's very funny." "It's not funny." So I said, "Let's put it in front of an audience." Okay. So we went to the New Art, and we said, "Who's the manager?" "Well, the owner's upstairs, Kim Jorgensen." And we said to Kim, "Can I just put this up? Can you just show this reel, this 10 minutes? Okay. So I forgot. It was some Woody Allen or Mel Brooks movie or something, and they put up the 10 minutes, and it was great. I mean, the audience loved it. And Jerry and David and Jim went, "You're right, it's funny." And Kim said to me, "What is this?" We said, "Well, we're trying to get $500,000 to make the movie." And he said, "If I get you the $500,000, can I be the executive producer?" Sure. He took the print, he flew to San Francisco, met with these people, came back the next day. "I got here, $500,000. So we made the movie. Now, the most interesting part of this, something I think is very funny, so Kim Jorgensen is the executive producer of Kentucky Fried Movie. Kentucky Fried Movie was a big hit, made a lot of money, so he became wealthy. And with his money, he bought the rights to his favorite book by Isaac Dens, I forgot the name, some famous Dutch writer. And he tried to make that movie for years and years and years, and then finally he got it made. So then he moved back to Holland. So Kim has only 2 credits. He's the executive producer of Kentucky Fried Movie, and he's the executive producer of Out of Africa. Isn't that wild? Anyway, so while I was cutting Kentucky Fried Movie, my script girl, the continuity person, was named Catherine Boots, and her boyfriend was an executive at Universal Studios. And they had a script called Animal House, which was very funny and very offensive, and they couldn't find, no one would touch it. And she suggested to Sean Daniels, she said, "I'm working on a very funny movie." And it's still amazing to me when I look back. They brought me the script and they said, would you make this movie? And I said, well, because the script was, 1, the funniest thing I've ever read, and 2, truly offensive. I mean, really offensive. So I said, okay, well, I would like to, but the script needs to be changed. So they hired me to supervise a rewrite, and I flew to New York to meet with very brilliant Doug Kenny and Harold Ramis and Chris Miller, and we rewrote it, their script. Because my biggest contribution, I said, everyone can't be a pig. You have to like somebody. So I said, there has to be like a good fraternity and a bad fraternity. And then we made Animal House. And the most remarkable thing about that, it was a very low budget movie, but is that was before Kentucky Fried came out. Kentucky Fried was released while we were shooting Animal House. That would never happen now, never. That was with the studios in the old days. And then both of them were big hits. So I was fine for a while. Well, American Werewolf is meant to be serious. I mean, American Werewolf is a horror film. It's not a happy story. And it deals, I mean, the violence is real, and death is real, and it ends badly. Whereas Schlock is very much a comedy, and the violence is cartoony. And I think the big difference is one is silly and just a comedy, and the other was an attempt to make a supernatural subject and treat it seriously, which is why it's funny, because the two boys that the story happens to are smart and funny. It's funny, because later I made a movie called Innocent Blood, which I'm sure they changed the title to something ridiculous here, but that was bloody, terrible. But that's a comedy. I mean, that's not meant to be serious. That's silly and over the top. But I mean, I made all those movies, so I guess some of it is my sensibility. But my intention on Schlock was mostly silly, and my intention on Werewolf is mostly serious. But they're both funny. People have rules, and and I think the rules, especially about genre, make no sense. If you ever look at a movie like Casablanca, you ever seen Casablanca? It's an almost perfect movie. It's very funny. And so, it's also very dramatic and very romantic. But I just don't think it's whatever works. I don't know if this will translate in German, but one of my favorite lines in Casablanca is when Humphrey Bogart's character, Rick, is decided to get out, and he goes to the character played by Sidney Greenstreet, the big guy, who has a rival club, and they're talking, and Sidney Greenstreet looks at him and says, "Why did you ever come to Casablanca, Rick?" And Bogart says, "I came for the waters." And Greenstreet says, "There are no waters in Casablanca." And Rick says, "I was misinformed." It's one of my favorite lines.